originally when I was introduced to the company, I said, "Hey guys, I'm here to help put some guardrails on." Gary stopped me. He said, "No, you're supposed to help me hover above the tracks like the trains in Japan and move faster than I'm even moving now."
Welcome back, and I'm sitting here live in VaynerMedia headquarter Empire. This is better than Disney World, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, we're modeling it after Disney. Zappos.
It's unbelievable. I walked in, I'm like, I have literally followed the yellow brick road to Oz. Anyway, I'm sitting here with James Orsini, the Chief Operating Officer of VaynerMedia, and really just first of all, thank you for meeting with me.
It's my pleasure.
Can't
Good
tell
to be
you
on the
this is incredible. I've been lucky enough to be around some great leaders, interview some great people, but doing my research on you and learning more about you, man, this is going to be a special half an hour, 45 minutes. So I really appreciate your time.
I'm looking forward to it.
So those of you who don't know, James Orsini is the COO of VaynerMedia, which is owned by Gary Vaynerchuk, which is, you'd have to be living under a rock not to know.
I tell people that often.
Right? Like you say, even my mother, who is a nurse practitioner in Maryland, knows who Gary Vee is. My 13-year-old daughters follow Gary Vee.
And they want his sneakers.
And they want his sneakers, right? I want his sneakers, but they don't make size 16 yet.
Oh, no. So well, my son was happy to nail a size 13.
Yeah, they stop at 13. So maybe I could just wear the box or something, which would be awesome. So, but thanks. I want to get into a lot of your brain. I want to pick it apart. One of the things that I'd love for the listeners to know is what is your day-to-day job here? I'm saying everybody knows this thing is moving. This is like a freight train moving 150 miles an hour, so it's got to be moving in all directions. But what do you see as your primary role being the COO?
Well, it's so funny because you refer to it as a freight train moving that fast. And originally when I was introduced to the company, I said, "Hey guys, I'm here to help put some guardrails on." Gary stopped me. He said, "No, you're supposed to help me hover above the tracks like the trains in Japan and move faster than I'm even moving now."
Wow.
So, I'm an enabler. I help Gary's vision come to pass in whatever capacity he needs me to do that in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, one of the things you had said and mentioned in one of your articles is that you see yourself as a facilitator.
Yeah.
As a facilitator to get things done and to maybe remove the roadblocks. Let's start. Where does that come from? I'm assuming most people, if they do their research, they'll find out your past. But you didn't start out in VaynerMedia. There's obviously a story behind this.
Right? It's a lengthy story.
So what's the story behind it that gets you at this point in your career to an office? I'm looking out your office window right now at the Empire State Building, working for a guy that is quite possibly changing the world in many different ways.
Yeah, he's a special guy.
How does that happen?
So, really, my background's accounting. I was an auditor for KPMG. That's where it all got started, and I thought that was going to be my path. Went to Wall Street. I worked for Goldman Sachs for a while, but really, as an auditor, I got to see an advertising company as one of my clients, a branding company in particular. And I said to myself, I could actually see myself here someday in this environment. I like this creative environment. I feel comfortable in it. And, just sort of a dog-ear note. I got a call one day from a guy who I worked for at KPMG, and he said, "Hey, James, the Saatchi brothers just bought a single public relations firm in New York, and they're going to create a worldwide company. And if you leave Goldman Sachs, someday you'll be the CFO of that worldwide company." Fast forward 5 years later, I was overseeing 31 offices in 26 countries. We had built the 5th largest public relations firm in the world. So began a life in advertising. Started in public relations. I then went to branding, where I worked at Interbrand. I then went to general market advertising, where I came back to Saatchi & Saatchi, but this time at the main advertising company. I was most recently the CEO of a small publicly traded mobile media company, trades on the NASDAQ, Cedo Mobile, and then found my way into Gary's world. And when I had dinner with him, he said, look, I want to build a $500 million independent, international, integrated communications company. Can you help me do it? And I said, yeah, I think I can.
All right, so there's a lot in there. And one of the glaring questions is, and this is by no means, but it is stereotyping auditors and accountants. Mm-hmm. But you get a job at Goldman Sachs, and auditors, in my experience, or maybe the stereotype is that they need a ton of certainty. Right? Mm-hmm. They're very logic minded.
Yes.
You're at Goldman Sachs, which at the point.
In the 80s.
Yeah, people aren't leaving Goldman Sachs.
No, they're running out of it.
They're running towards the door. Sure as hell not running out, to venture outside of something that gives them a ton of certainty.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that question because there's a lot of people I know listening, a lot of people that I've experienced, even myself, that I've felt at times where certainty is comfortable. Mm-hmm. And hey, this is what I went to school for. This is my education. Let me just stay in this. Yeah. And here you are with at the time one of the best well-known companies in the country, if not the world. And you're going to leave, jump ship to go do something else.
Yeah.
What's your mindset there?
Well, I'm not a big risk taker. It's I think why I get along with Gary so well, because I'm the opposite of him, right? Yeah. So he says, look, you've made a great career at hitting singles and doubles and getting around the bases, and I swing for the stands every time, and the next time I get in the box, I get hit in the head with the pitch, right? So I'm conservative by nature. Now, that being said, I'm trusting. Yeah. And I trusted the guy on the other end of the phone. It was somebody I had worked with before, who convinced me and made a promise that came to pass. This is why you've heard me mention on another podcast. Pick an individual, not a company that you're going to work for.
Yeah, love that quote.
Yeah, so I had worked for that guy now twice in my career. We went on to be great friends, and he went on to great success in the industry as well. It was risky. It was risky even as the auditor. I originally went to work for a company called Main Herdman. It was number 9 at the time, but there were big 8. Yeah. But you know what? I felt comfortable in the hallways. The client roster was nice. The building was spectacular on Park Avenue here in New York. And I'm like, I know I could work for a big 8, but I'm picking number 9. It's okay. Yeah. So, similarly with Goldman Sachs, they wouldn't have normally hired, a non-Ivy League son of a plumber from Newark, New Jersey. But I found my way into the hallways. So it was another thing that I was able to prove to myself. Still in contact with the bosses that I had there. It's and now here at VaynerMedia, sitting next to Gary's younger brother AJ at a basketball game 9 years ago is, how I became aware of the brothers, really.
Yeah, which is crazy. So you touched on it a little bit, but one of the things I wanted to ask you was, and I know your father passed recently.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah,
so
my
deepest regards. But you, son of a plumber.
Yeah.
Grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And now you're sitting on the 25th floor, again, overlooking the New York City skyline, COO of, 800 employees, growing organization. How does that happen? How does that, we talk a lot about, our upbringing, our programming. Right. It's got to be a pretty good.
Yeah, look, family is really important. Prayer is very powerful. And when I look back on it, I was always a much better businessman than I ever was an accountant. And I grew up around a family that had their own businesses. I just never really wanted my own. Yeah. And what I quickly realized is that I was an enabler. And helping others sort of fulfill their dreams was something that I was pretty good at. Gary asked me to describe what you do in a sentence, and I said I take dreams and visions and put them into action plans. Yeah. That's kind of how it worked. But a lot of it was connections and the people that I've met along the way, and the people who were willing to help me at a time that I needed help. You know, this is why at 55 I'm still doing this now for others. You know, and doing that same thing.
Yeah, so you talk about that a lot, the connections, and the connections being, you know, really important. And so a lot of people underestimate that, I think. I think that, you know, one of the things, as you've progressed through your career, you've said that you've always been able to, you still have a relationship with all those former bosses.
Yeah,
or
literally in my cell phone.
Which you know, and we were talking before the show that most people understand that in a principle, in a concept way, don't burn your bridges when you leave.
Right.
But what you've done is actually kind of reverse that and said, not only am I not going to burn them, I'm going to strengthen them. I'm going to keep them going. And was that did you set out to have that mindset? Were you taught that by somebody? Was that just an innate, intrinsic kind of, I gotta know that this is how you do, this is how you operate?
Look, I was always part of the pay it forward concept, right? So I think the notion of helping people simply because you're in a position where you can is important. You know, it helps when you're operating from a position of strength, right? Not a position of weakness. So funny, when my kids were small, they're not now, but when they were small, I was like, look, if you guys go down, I could help you. There's no problem. But if I get sick, we got a problem. So don't be sneezing on me, don't be coughing on me, don't be waking me up in the middle of the night, you know. And everybody kind of had that, okay, great, we got to keep him healthy and then we're all going to be good. Yeah. So, you know, and it's very similar to, you know, how I've operated. You know, I take the time to understand what it is that people do. And then I'm always thinking of a way that I might be able to, you know, I push out so much content that I consume and say, hey, this might be right for you. You might want to consider that. Just today, 3 different positions that I came across that were right for people that were looking for a change. You know, just forward it to them through LinkedIn, texted one guy, you might want to check this out, sent the podcast to another guy in a text. I mean, it's become so second nature now that it's amazing. You know, I don't even want to think of how many people, you know, are there in numbers that I'm helping. I mean, it would be overwhelming. I don't even want to look back.
Oh, it's I can't. You know, in this day and age, I think that there's a lot of talk about ROI and return on investment, and people confuse that. And obviously, if you're a Gary fan, if you follow Gary. His belief is the investment's always there, the return's always there by doing the right thing. Right. But that's not. I don't know if that's a general concept that people really wrap their head around. I'm saying you taking, you know, I referenced at the beginning, but you taking time out of your day on a Thursday at 2:00 in the afternoon to sit down and do a 30-minute, 45-minute interview with me, where I'm not a Fortune 100 company, so I'm not hiring VaynerMedia to do my advertising anytime soon. Maybe one day, but for you to do that when the return isn't right there in front of you, that's
the return for me
trait.
Is 1,000 people that are listening, and maybe 2 get a wake up call. Yeah, you know, and that's you know, which is why I'm aligned with Gary in that. That's the way he's been operating for years. Yeah. And it's the way I've been operating. You know what I mean? It's the fulfillment is in the ability to, you know, help. But I do it along. I don't have to stop the normal course of action, right? I was pretty clear. You had this slot, not a moment before the slot, not a moment after the slot. But the good news is you got the slot. Yeah. So you know, I just keep it on track, keep it going. My time's important, and I use it really efficiently and effectively. This was the whole thing when you were talking about the facilitation and not delegation. Yeah. Right. So in order to facilitate, you have to take the time to understand what people do. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, you really have to take the time. You know, I had somebody in there again earlier today. A woman from our West Coast office, you know, and she's like, but I don't understand. You don't have an admin? You don't have a department? I'm like, no, I don't have an admin. I don't have a department. Yeah, you know, I take the time to understand what 800 people do, and then I connect the dots, and they help scale me to do what it is that Gary needs me to do.
That's fantastic. So what makes? So let's move on to the 800 people in the role you play here. I'm looking at your bookcase, and you got tons of great, unbelievable books. I'm an avid reader, and there's some pretty amazing books there. And you were talking about leadership and books. I would ask you what your favorite book was, and you were talking about
Six
Fundamentals.
Six
right?
Fundamentals of Success, right? Stuart Levine.
Unbelievable book.
Yeah.
What's your mindset? What's your theory on leadership, and what makes a good leader? You got 800 employees in how many countries?
Well, we just have our international office in London, and we're going to open a second one in Singapore in the first quarter.
Yeah, right, Singapore.
Yeah.
So what makes a good leader being able to scale that? What is that?
Well, I think first of all, I'm a leader because people choose to follow. I'm not a leader because I bang on the desk and tell everybody you got to pony up behind me. I have this title, I have that title, and I've, as you said, I've had a ton of titles over the course of a 30-year career. You got to find the style that works for you. I'm a servant leader, so servant leadership is its own methodology and its own course of direction. Helping serve others first, listening to their needs, helping with what they need to do, and then getting them, taking the time to explain the bigger picture. Often for me works because if it's a 30-minute meeting, I'll take the first 10 minutes to take them up what Gary calls the clouds. Okay, before we all get into the dirt. So let me help you understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Oftentimes, that's what I'm doing here for Gary, right? So I'm helping to translate what it is that he sees, because remember, he sees what so few others do. Right, so it's not crystal ball future. It's more he's paying attention to where attention is and what audiences are gravitating to. But so many of us haven't seen that yet. So now somebody has to help translate that, because we're going to pivot. The way we handle creative, the way we're doing production, the investments that we're making. The strategy that we're taking. So he's a disruptor, and this is a space. Look, let's face it, he wasn't an advertising guy, right? He and his brother were not advertising guys. No. So now you find yourself in an industry. It's been around 150 years, and how are you handling that? Well, you're questioning why they do what they do.
Turn it upside down.
Yeah, because you're not, you're not part of that DNA. So that questioning is it's refreshing, it's challenging, it's sometimes it's amorphous, right? So, but yet he has a way of harnessing, that energy to point in a single direction. To make an impact, and we're making an impact for our clients and for our employees. We have a relatively low voluntary turnover rate. People like being here.
Oh, listen, it is as we said earlier. It's the Goldman Sachs of the '80s. People are running in here. I can't imagine people are running out.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet from our chief creative officer, because we put out a call for a certain type of content creator, and he's like, all right, so we now have 700 emails in the mailbox, so be patient as we try and get through this.
Within a day.
It was like 48 hours.
What's amazing is, and you touched on a little bit, I talk a lot about people love the saying, which is one of my least favorite: if it's not broke, don't fix it. Where I'm a believer, if it's not broke, break it.
Yeah, well, Gary likes breaking things. This is an environment that we're fine testing in and optimizing. It's kind of what we do. He's not afraid to make a mistake. How
does that translate? How does it translate from the top, from you, from Gary, to the person working at the desk today, that says, hey, listen, we're not afraid to make a mistake. The idea of you get into work for Vayner, you get this dream job, and in most people's opinion, you work here. This is, again, the epitome of places to work, and all of a sudden you start to hold on because you're afraid to make a mistake. But here you're saying, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. Right. How does that translate to those employees?
Well, I think you said it best when you walked in. You felt the energy here. We've dispelled a lot of notions around millennials and a younger workforce. They are super collaborative. They're super smart.
Unbelievable.
They're like sponges. They want to know. They're not precious with their, in my coming up the ranks and files, you didn't want to share your idea with anybody else because you were afraid somebody was going to take that idea. And here they look at the seating, right? Why does it feel different here than it might have at Saatchi? Well, because there's 4 offices and 600 people share the views. Like we didn't.
Correct. There's no walls.
There's no walls, right? There's no boundaries.
Literally no walls.
Literally. So and we designed it where your reception area is right into the heart of the agency. Most hold you off in another, in an alcove until you are invited in to see behind the curtain. Well, Gary's all about honesty and openness and transparency. So how can the design not be that? Right. So it was part of what we did. When we were doing it here.
So you talked about millennials right now, and I don't know about this office in particular, but right now there's 5 different generations in the workforce. So you got from baby boomers to what's after millennials?
Gen Z.
Gen Z, right? So you got 5 different. How do you bring 5 different generations? I don't know if you have baby boomers working here.
I'm a baby boomer. I'm the last of the baby boomers. I was born in 1963.
Perfect. Well, you look a lot younger.
I appreciate that.
So the how do you bring those 5 different mindsets and get them? Because I can understand millennial to millennial, I can understand Gen Z, but how do you get the baby boomer to understand the mindset of collaboration, contribution with different generations that grew up in different times? Gary posted yesterday, or one day this week, I apologize. Your parents went to war, fought depression, and you're complaining about how many likes you get. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do you, inside these walls, how do you get those 5 generations to work together and understand each other's mindset?
It's interesting. You have to take the time to understand. So, interesting statistic today that the average millennial had $42,000 in debt, most of which was not college,
not school,
right? So that's a scary thing. So they come in with debt. So now I spent some time with the HR department and recognizing that, hey, we may need different benefits for them, right? We're talking put away for your 401k, and they're like, listen, I can't get out from the debt that's under me from college. Like, forget about 401k. I'm eating ramen. Help me out. So I think taking the time to understand what it is that they're going through, and we've made some adjustments here in catering to some things like quiet rooms and snacks and things that matter to that generation to help them fuel camaraderie. There's a lot of socialization here, much more than in any other company that I've had. But there is no substitute for wisdom and experience, right? So that's what somebody like I bring. But yet I never cease to amaze me how many people will just ask for 15 minutes of my time to just understand what it is that I'm doing, right? So, normally you wouldn't book 15 minutes with the COO if you didn't know them.
Correct.
You know what I mean? But hey, there's a spirit of boldness here, right? But it's almost like, why would it be any different than my college professor, right? If I need him, I book time with him and I go in there and we talk about stuff. So
very little fear.
Yeah. So I have to be open for that as well. And a lot of what I do is just share how things are done or how things have been done, so we can do it better, not so we could replicate that. Okay. But Gary said one time when he was hiring me, you've made 25 years of mistakes I don't want to make. Help me avoid them so I can move faster. It's all about speed for him, right? So doing the same thing here, you know, and you're going to be meeting with my colleague Claude, our chief heart officer, and she'll tell you how we do a yin and yang. You know, she'll meet with somebody and you know, see that they're maybe drifting in a little bit or a little confused about a career move or something like that, and she'll say, you know what, you got to talk to James. Yeah. We're gonna just set up 15 minutes with James there, and I make the time to do that as well. You know, so I think that Gary talks a lot about intent, and our intent is in the right place. So even if we make a mistake, as long as our intent was in the right place, it's how we sleep at night.
Yeah, right.
And even for our clients, you know, look, we're not perfect. You know, we make a mistake there too. But I think what they're finding so refreshing is that we are transparent, we are collaborative, and we are supportive, but we are also convicted in knowing, you know, what it is that they may need to move their product or sell their service.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's keep going. Let's a couple more questions. One of the things we had talked about in the beginning was the how you guys operate. You know, you were talking about you were spending 3 days over in Long Island City because you have your own production studio.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of an outlier of what normally happens, right? Yeah. That's not the norm. What causes you to, again, think that way, to say, all right, hey, listen, we're going to have our own production studio, our own people, our own, you know?
Yeah, I think you got to work backwards from the end game. So the end game here is Gary wants to buy the jets. Okay, we need multiple $1 billion to buy the jets. It's not going to come through selling his company. Okay, that's not, you know, on the game plan right now. Yeah. It's going to come through buying orphaned or abandoned brands, running them through a marketing machine to increase their value, and then sell those brands. Right. Okay, so if you work backwards from the answer, then you realize, okay, you're going to establish this holding company model, the VaynerX model, and you're going to bring into the VaynerX model all the pieces that you deem appropriate to eventually lift the value of a brand. Right. So does it have traditional digital agency capabilities like account, strategy, and creative? It absolutely does. Does it have its own full service media planning and buying division? It does. Does it have a standalone production company to produce content with impact and volume? It does. Does it now have its own digital publishing division as the gallery? It does, right? You know, and more to come based on what he deems the need is, right? So we have an e-commerce department here. We have a smart products department here. We're paying some attention to small business now and some of the things there, because remember, this was built to service a Fortune 100 client base. Right. But Gary has an enormous following with the entrepreneurs and smaller businesses. How do they become the wine library? How do they go from $1 million to 60 million, right? So he and I in particular, and others here, are working on some things that could be targeted more appropriately to that audience.
Yeah, I interviewed last week. I had the great pleasure of interviewing the CEO of a company called Make Offices, so co-sharing offices, the third largest in the country. And he gave me an incredible statistic, which is by 2022, 53% of the workforce will be entrepreneurs, will be sole entrepreneurs. That's 53% of the people who are going to own their own company.
Well, you know, interesting, and to dovetail on that same statistic, right? So we were just talking about the baby boomers, right? So my statistic is that 10,000 baby boomers per day are turning 65, and that's going to run that way for the next decade, every day for the next decade, turning 65. Now, today I had lunch with a guy who just closed another big deal, multiple $1 million deal. And then he said, James, you know how old I am, right? And I said, I don't know, late 60s. He said, I'm 75. Okay, he's still doing deals. He's 75.
He's still wheeling and dealing.
Yeah. So will all these folks possibly become late blooming entrepreneurs?
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, and you hear that from Gary's content. He's like, you're never too old, right?
Especially now as the length of age, the length of life continues to increase and will continue to
exactly.
Get
we were talking about my dad. I mean, he was 94 years old, right? So you know, there's length of life. There's a lot of things are gonna be different than the way we knew them now, and you have to be able to adapt. You can't be afraid to stop learning. I'm still learning here. I mean,
it seems like you're an avid learner, but also an avid contributor. It seems like you, from everything I've read, from the conversation we've had, that you kind of read, you figure it all out, and then you send it back out.
Yep.
You add to it and send it back out. Why do you think that is? Where do you think that comes from? This idea of contribution.
Well, look, there's certainly my mom who said, "Don't be afraid to dream big dreams and always be a leader and not a follower." That's what was instilled to me as a young age. But more importantly, I'm an observer, right? So we had our group of interns here. We had another group come in who made a presentation. Presentation was on corporate appearance and dress and things like that. And I said, that was kind of interesting. I wonder if Seton Hall University's Career Development Center would be interested in that. I sit on the board of regents for Seton Hall University. So I'm going to send a note to the head of the Career Development Center right from the room. Now, I'm sitting there at that time, and that's important, right? Yeah. I don't have a to-do list. I do it immediately as it's hot and thinking about it, and I'm, texting or emailing or something like that. So I wouldn't remember that 48 hours from now. Right. But in the heat of that moment, I realized, these are all college kids. They seem to be hanging on every word. Might be a good thing, and it's probably been a year and a half since that woman got an email from me. Right. So she realizes if something hits her inbox, important. This is something I should pay attention to.
Correct.
And they've already had a meeting, with this other, now whether or not this consulting firm does anything or presents to them, it was the notion of, those are two dots that go together, and I'm the common denominator in that. So let me try and broker that.
That's fantastic. 3 more questions. With staying on that self-growth, what are some ways, besides, obviously, I look at your publication, you're a reader, you read the Wall Street Journal, you read it every day. Besides that, what are some of your areas for personal growth, personal development that you spend time doing?
So I'm a big family guy. I absolutely love the time with my family.
Yeah.
And people ask me all the time, how do you get as much done as you get done? You know what I mean? You're obviously in a senior role here in a company that's growing and exploding. You have a loving family that you often spend time with. If you look at any of my social channels, you'll see, breakfast with them, dining here, vacationing there. I am active on 3 boards. I sit on the board of regents for Seton Hall University. I sit on the board of Renovation House, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center for men. I chair the Griffin Bridges Foundation for academically gifted, financially challenged Greater Newark boys. We scholar them into Seton Hall Prep. And it's because I'm the same person in every one of those venues. Right, so that's how I can scale. If I were wearing masks and and doing different things, a schemer at work, a boozer at playtime, a womanizer over there, it just doesn't work for me, right? Yeah. So because I am the same in every environment that I'm in, this is what I like about Gary. What you see is what you get wherever he is. I'm able to scale and do. There's no, I'm not changing into a cape. It's the same guy going through everything like that. So that helps me. And then those worlds come together, right? So it's not unusual for VaynerMedia to be a mile marker sponsor for one of my charities. Yeah. Okay, it's not unusual for the leadership program at Seton Hall University to send their best students here to VaynerMedia to be employees. It all then intertwines. Yeah. You know what I mean? My son's girlfriend works here. My cousin's daughter works here. So the worlds are all kind of one now. Yeah. And that's the scaling. That's the ability to scale.
That's fantastic. So in doing my research, reading all your blogs, reading all your articles, the one thing I didn't find was the book written by James Orsini. So what is the title of your book going to be? And what would it be about?
Yeah,
if you haven't picked the title yet, what written word are you going to leave behind in that when you write that book?
Yeah, you know what? I think it'll be to whom much is given, much is expected.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So last question. What is when you leave this earth many years from now, you look back, what do you want your ultimate contribution to be? What is it that you want people to say, hey, this is the contribution left by James Orsini?
Hey, for me, when I get to the gates of heaven, I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant, for eternity. But here, I saw that when my dad passed. It was, excuse me. Number of people who showed up.
Yeah.
Who said that he was a help.
Awesome. Listen,
sorry.
No. Listen, I get it, and that's what it's about. That's
for me.
Ultimately, that's what it's about. I have a very strong faith, and I share that sentiment with you. Awesome.
Okay.
Listen, thank you very much. I appreciate. Listen again. I can't tell you how much this is I talk about a lot. This is a bucket list interview for me. So I appreciate you taking the time and really opening yourself up to those types of questions and sharing.
I hope your
with
audience
viewers.
gets something out of it.
Oh, trust me. If everybody that didn't listen didn't, I know it changed my world. So
Great.
Thank you very much.